Around 1177 BCE, the most powerful civilizations on Earth started falling, one after another, in the span of a single generation. Great cities burned to the ground and were never rebuilt. Trade routes that had connected the Mediterranean for centuries went silent. Entire written languages simply stopped being used. Egyptian records blame one enemy for the chaos. A coalition of warriors who came from the sea, destroyed everything in their path, and then vanished so completely that, thousands of years later, we still don't know where they came from or where they went. Historians just call them the Sea Peoples, and that name is really just a polite way of saying we have no idea who they actually were. This isn't a myth like Atlantis. This isn't a legend passed down through poetry. This is one of the best documented mass migrations of the ancient world, carved into stone by the very empire that survived them. And it's still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. Somebody brought the Bronze Age to its knees. Egypt wrote about it in detail. And yet, more than 3,000 years later, historians are still arguing about the most basic question of all. Who were they? Welcome to the truth behind the story. To understand how shocking this was, you need to understand what the Eastern Mediterranean looked like right before it happened. Around 1200 BCE, this region was arguably the most interconnected the ancient world had ever been. The Egyptian Empire, the Hittite Empire, ruling most of Anatolia, Mycenaean Greece with its palace-based kingdoms, the city-states of Canaan and the Levant, Cyprus, Assyria and Babylon further east. These weren't isolated civilizations. They traded with each other constantly, tin and copper to make bronze, luxury goods, grain, even royal brides, through a web of alliances so dense that historians call it the first true international system in human history. And then, within roughly 50 years, most of it was gone. The Hittite Empire collapsed entirely and never returned. Mycenaean palaces across Greece were burned, Pylos, Mycenae, Tiryns, and the sophisticated writing system the Greeks had used, called Linear B, vanished along with them, plunging Greece into a genuine dark age with no writing at all for roughly 400 years. Major cities across the Levant, Ugarit, one of the wealthiest trading ports in the ancient world, were destroyed and never rebuilt. Only Egypt survived. Barely. And Egypt is the reason we know who supposedly did this. The most detailed evidence comes from the temple of Pharaoh Ramesses III at Medinet Habu, where enormous carved reliefs and inscriptions describe a massive invasion in his 8th year, around 1177 BCE. The inscriptions describe a coalition of foreign peoples who had already destroyed other lands, moving both by land, with ox carts carrying entire families, suggesting mass migration, not just an army, and by sea, in distinctive ships with bird-head prows. The Egyptian text lists several named groups within this coalition: the Peliset, the Checker, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, and the Weshesh, among others. Ramesses III claims to have defeated them in a major land battle and a naval battle, the first naval battle in recorded history that we have a detailed account of, and the Medinet Habu reliefs show Egyptian archers trapping enemy ships close to shore. Egypt survived, but the text itself admits the price. The Sea Peoples had already, in the pharaoh's own words, laid waste to lands no other kingdom could withstand. Egypt won the battle. It's not clear anyone else did. Here's where the mystery deepens, because those 5 names aren't complete unknowns. They're just frustratingly close to answers without ever quite confirming them. The Peliset are the group most historians feel confident about. Most scholars connect them to the Philistines, who appear afterward settling on the coast of Canaan, in cities like Ashkelon and Ashdod, giving the region the name Palestine that would echo for thousands of years afterward. The Shekelesh and Shurdan, mentioned in earlier Egyptian records, possibly part of the same broader movement, are often linked to Sicily and Sardinia, either as their origin or as where some of them eventually resettled. Egyptian art even shows Shurdan warriors wearing horned helmets, a detail that shows up independently in Sardinian Bronze Age artifacts. The Danaian have been connected, controversially, to the Danans, one of Homer's own names for the Greeks in the Iliad. Notice the pattern. Every single one of these connections is plausible, none of them is proven, and archaeologists have spent over a century arguing about all of them without reaching a consensus. This is the part that should feel unsettling. After 150 years of scholarship, historians still don't agree on a single point of origin. The leading theories don't describe one invading nation, they describe a chain reaction. One theory points to the collapse of Mycenaean Greece itself. As Greek palace societies fell apart from internal pressures, displaced populations may have taken to the sea, becoming raiders and eventually part of the very coalition that toppled other kingdoms. Another theory points further north and west. The Sea Peoples, as a mixed wave of displaced groups from Anatolia, the Aegean Islands, and even as far as Sicily and Sardinia, pushed together by something that made staying home impossible. And that something leads to the most debated theory of all: climate. Ice core and pollen evidence from this exact period shows signs of a severe, prolonged drought across the eastern Mediterranean, around 1200 BCE crop failures, famine, diplomatic letters from this era, including desperate requests from Hittite kings begging Egypt for emergency grain shipments, support this. Put together, one leading model looks like this. Drought causes famine. Famine causes internal collapse in multiple kingdoms simultaneously. Collapse displaces populations. Displaced populations become raiders looking for new land. And the raiding accelerates the collapse of the next kingdom in a chain reaction across the entire eastern Mediterranean. Under this theory, the Sea Peoples weren't the single cause of the Bronze Age collapse. They were as much a symptom of it as a cause. Here's the final twist, and it's the one that really earns the word mysterious. The Sea Peoples don't have a next chapter. There's no empire named after them. No later civilization proudly claims direct descent from the Sea Peoples, the way Egyptians trace lineage to the pharaohs, or Greeks trace lineage to Mycenae. Instead, they simply seem to dissolve into the populations of the places they eventually settled. The Peliset became the Philistines, a genuinely documented Iron Age civilization in Canaan, eventually absorbed and erased as a distinct culture by later conquests, including the Babylonians and Assyrians. Others likely settled quietly on Cyprus, in Sicily, or in coastal Anatolia, intermarrying and blending into existing populations within a generation or two, leaving artifacts, but no written record explaining who they used to be. There was no final battle that wiped them out. There was no last stand, no dramatic ending. They simply stopped being a distinct them and became part of everyone else. The Bronze Age collapse remains one of the most dramatic civilizational resets in recorded history, a moment when the most advanced, interconnected societies on the planet fell within a single human lifetime, and the survivors couldn't fully explain what had happened to them either. Egypt itself never fully recovered its former power after this event, and the group blamed for so much of it left behind spectacular evidence of the destruction they caused, carved in stone by the one empire that survived to tell the story, but almost no evidence of who they actually were before the ships appeared on the horizon. Which raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with. How much of history is written not by the people who caused an event, but by the one side left standing afterward, telling the story in whatever way makes sense to them? We know the Sea Peoples appeared. We know they had names, ships and families travelling with them. We know they helped bring an interconnected Bronze Age world to its knees. But 3,200 years later, we still can't answer the most basic question a historian is supposed to answer. Who were they really? If a mystery this big, hiding in plain sight on temple walls for 3,000 years, surprised you, subscribe to The Truth Behind the Story. Because sometimes the most important question in history isn't what happened, it's who never got the chance to tell their side of it.